Okay, in the last video I talked a little bit about kind of allocating your study time and what kinds of studying you should be doing and doing active strategies rather than passive ones. I think another really important thing in terms of allocating your time rationally to maximize your chances is to really focus on the most important subjects. And again, this is something where I think sometimes commercial bar prep courses lead students down the wrong path by having them too much time on really minor subjects. It's a lot of times not a good use of your limited time you have to try to get in as much material as you can. What I think is really important is to focus on the big 7 subjects. Those are the 7 subjects that comprise the MBE, the multiple choice portion of the exam. That is Civ Pro, Contracts, Con Law, Crim Law and Procedure, Evidence, Property, and Torts. Those 7 subjects are guaranteed to be on the multiple choice portion of the exam. They break them up roughly equally, so you'll have about 30 questions, a little less than 30 questions per subject on the MBE. That is guaranteed. The multiple choice portion in most states counts for half of the exam. Right, as you know, the other half of the exam is kind of broken up different ways. You have a bunch of essays, usually MPT, maybe 6 or 8 essays depending on the state. But remember that even for the essays, in most states, about half of the essay questions are also drawn from the same big 7 subjects. Okay, and then the other half of the essays are drawn from the more minor subjects, things like trust and estates and family law. So a lot of years, the minor subjects don't even come up, things like trust and estates and family law. So statistically, what this means is that, basically the big 7 subjects like contracts, statistically they count for something close to 10% of the test every year. Whereas the minor subject like trust and estates count for only something like 2% statistically. So you should really spend by far most of your time on the big 7 subjects. And again, taking into account that you're not trying to get 100% on the bar exam, you're only trying to get something like 70% so you can pass. So just to tell you a story, when I took the bar, I didn't even study for family law at all. I literally did not. I never took family law in law school. I didn't study for family law at all. And then I got a family law question on the essay portion of the exam that year. Which obviously wasn't a great thing, but I just kind of BS'd my way through it, probably got a point or 2 for saying something that sounded reasonably smart, but basically through that question, it didn't matter, I passed anyway because I got enough on the rest of the exam. And I wouldn't advise doing that. I think you should study the minor subjects some, but just really you should be spending by far most of your time on the big 7 subjects. Beyond that, again, it's also worth remembering a couple other things. One is that no matter what happens, there's going to be questions on there that you're not going to know. A few years ago here in Minnesota, there was an essay question from Civ Pro, and the question was whether you can interlocutorily appeal the denial of a pretrial third-party interpleader motion or something like that. I had taught Civ Pro a few years ago, and I had absolutely no idea what the answer to that question was when some students emailed me about it after the bar exam. And it was something that wasn't covered in any of the commercial bar prep courses at the time. So it's something that just everyone got totally thrown off by. But again, the point is that, in the bar exam, when you're not trying to get 100%, you can totally whiff on a question like that, and a lot of times everyone else is going to whiff too, and you just can't let it throw you too much. Along the same lines, when you're studying, there are just some things that are going to be really hard, and it's not worth getting bogged down in minor points. Like for me, I never understood the rule against perpetuities. I didn't understand it in law school, and I didn't understand it when I was studying for the bar. I just could not get it through my head for some reason. I still can't. But it's not worth spending a day trying to dig into the rule against perpetuities, because at the end of the day, there's only going to be maybe 2 multiple choice questions on the rule against perpetuities on the entire bar out of 200 questions. So that's 1% at most of the exam. Again, it's just not worth getting bogged down in that. So I just figured, listen, I'll learn the rest of the stuff that makes more sense to me. When I get to those questions, I'll just guess and kind of hope for the best. And that is fine to take that strategy. You've got to learn a lot of it, but you don't need to learn every single thing. And don't get totally bogged down or totally stressed out by minor points that you can't get. Get the main stuff and you'll do fine. Because think of it this way. Imagine if you took a test with 100 questions and you only actually knew the answer to 50 of them on a multiple choice test. And say maybe another 30 of them you could narrow it down to 2 options, but then you had to guess between the 2. And say on the other 20 of them you had absolutely no idea and you were just randomly guessing between the 4 choices. If you walked out of that test, you'd probably feel pretty crappy relative to what most of your expectations are for how tests should go. But statistically, you would actually end up getting about 70% correct if you ended up doing it that way. And that's not a bad result in the bar exam. That's kind of in the range you're aiming for. So again, think about your resource allocation and really focus on the big 7 and memorizing the main concepts in those courses that are frequently tested. And again, that is what the OPE is exactly great for. It focuses on the big 7 subjects, the MBE subjects, and it's the best way to get that material into your head.